So before we jump into actually writing the quadratic equation with a specific axis of symmetry and minimum or maximum value, let's remind ourselves about the relationship between the axis of symmetry and minimum maximum value and the vertex. If you recall from yesterday, we talked a little bit about the relationship between the axis of symmetry and the vertex, and we discovered that the axis of symmetry shares the same number as the x-coordinate of our vertex. X equals 3 means that our vertex would be 3 comma something. There's a similar relationship happening between our minimum or maximum value and the vertex. The minimum or maximum value turns out to actually be the same as our y-coordinate of our vertex. So if we had a minimum value at 3, then the y-coordinate of our vertex would be something comma 3. Now, that means that really we only need one thing in order to write a quadratic equation, because we don't care about the dilation that's happening there. We're only really caring about it having that specific axis of symmetry and the specific minimum or maximum value. So the only thing that we need to write that quadratic equation is the vertex. So we're going to use our vertex form, which is why we practiced graphing a little bit in the notes, even though it wasn't part of our graphing objective. Because if we can find the vertex, we can write an equation really quickly. Just to remind ourselves, h is always the opposite of what it appears to be, and k is always the same as what it appears to be. And our vertex is h comma k. So when I'm going to write an equation for a quadratic that has a given minimum or maximum value and axis of symmetry, I'm going to label what is going to be my vertex, my hk. The x-coordinate of our vertex comes from this axis of symmetry. So we'll have -2 as the h value. And k will come from our minimum or maximum value. In this case, it's a maximum value. So it's at 3. And the only other little bit of information that's given to us is that it is called a maximum for that vertex. What that tells us is that it's going to be opening down, because that's the only way to get that maximum or highest value for a parabola, which means that a has to be negative. So when we go to write our equation, we'll have y equals a negative value for a, parentheses h minus, and we would plug in -2. So your choice, you can put in minus a negative, or you can automatically change it to plus a positive, squared, and then we'll have plus our k value. And that's our equation. Let's do another one. So to identify our vertex, we'll find our x-coordinate of our vertex from our axis of symmetry. So that will be at 3. And our y-coordinate will come from our minimum at 1. And because it's a minimum, that tells me that it's going to open up, which means that a is positive. So my equation looks a little something like this. Y equals, parenthesis, x minus, and we're plugging in 3. Notice how now in the equation, the h value looks like it's -3, but we know that's always the opposite of what it appears to be in the equation. Squared plus our k value, which in this case is 1. For number 3, we have a minimum value at -4 and an axis of symmetry at x equals -1. Just a reminder, anytime you see an axis of symmetry, it needs to be written as an equation. So our axis of symmetry will provide our x coordinate of our vertex, and our minimum value will provide our y coordinate of our vertex. So we'll have a vertex at -1, -4. It did say minimum, which means that it will open up, which means that A is going to be positive. So our equation would be y equals, just a positive value in front, x minus our x coordinate. So minus and -1 really means +1 squared. And then we have -4 or plus -4, which we would know reduces or simplifies down to -4. Let's do one more example. This one has a maximum at -2 and an axis of symmetry at x equals 5. So the axis of symmetry gives us our x coordinate of our vertex. So that will be at 5. And the maximum gives me my y coordinate of my vertex, -2. Since it's been labeled as a maximum, that indicates it's going to open down, which means that A is negative. So our equation would be y equals a -1 times x minus my h value, which is 5, quantity squared, and then plus a -2, which we know is really just -2.